Welcome everybody to the Lake Oswego Chamber of Commerce Friday morning networking, where we connect the faces of local business with our community and we help you to get your message out. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy Friday to join us. Today, we're fortunate enough to have Deputy Fire Marshal David Smith from the Lake Oswego Fire Department as our host. And before we get to our host, I think you're all familiar. We don't have any new guests on the call, so you know the way we roll today. We're going to hear from our host. We'll have time to ask him some questions, and then Liz will inform us of all the news that's fit to print in Lake Oswego before we break into some small groups for more intimate networking. And then we'll come back and we'll have some shout outs and a little raffle of things that were donated for our meeting today. So without any further ado, Deputy Fire Marshal David Smith, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I think for those that don't know, I'm kind of a last minute fill-in. Our fire marshal was, I think, scheduled to attend and he wasn't able to at the last minute. So get kind of the next best thing, I guess. Just a little bit about me. So I actually grew up on the East Coast. I've got a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and a master's degree in fire protection engineering. My work history is a little bit varied. So I grew up in the fire service. I was just mentioning to some of the folks that were on a moment ago, I'm kind of a fourth generation fire service. I did take a little bit of time away from the fire service. I was actually a fire protection engineer and did research and development work for 3M Company. So I worked at their corporate headquarters in St. Paul, Minneapolis, where there were, I think, over 30,000 people that reported to work every day. So it was a giant facility, large campus, great place to work. I really appreciated the opportunity when I was there, working with some amazing folks. I moved out here in the late 90s. I actually worked for a small fire testing lab up in Kelso. So we did fire testing on building products. We also did fire litigation work. So we would essentially try to, if you've ever watched Mythbusters, we would kind of build stuff and burn it just to kind of see what kind of fire patterns we would get, or measure, a whole bunch of different things that was used for fire testing and litigation support. As I mentioned, it was a small family business, and I do recall days where when payroll week came about, we were kind of looking at each other going, how are we going to make payroll? When we're waiting on payments from some of our clients, so it's kind of one of those things I tend to always, in part of my current role, appreciate, some of my past experiences. That and my parents were both small business owners. My mom opened a office supply store, and my dad was a general contractor. So it's kind of one of those things in my role now. I always try to recall, my experiences as a business owner. I left the fire lab in Kelso. I actually worked for Vancouver Fire Department. I was there for about 14 years in a similar capacity as a deputy fire marshal. And I've been here in Lake Oswego for just about 10 years and coming up on 10 years this year. So really enjoyed the small community here and really enjoy the folks. So as a deputy fire marshal, one of the things that I often get asked is, well, what do you do? What do you do during the day? And for us, it's pretty wide variety because we're a smaller organization. If we compare, or look at Vancouver or Portland with a lot larger staffing pool, they can kind of dedicate some of their staff to do certain tasks. Here in LO, we don't have that luxury. There's only two of us in the fire marshal's office. There's the fire marshal and myself, and we try to make do the best we can. Usually one of the first things that we're kind of task-based that is sort of time sensitive is fire investigations. So if there is a fire and our fire crews are not able to readily identify what the cause was, or if there's any potential where there was criminal activities or things of that nature, they would page for the on-duty fire investigator, and either the fire marshal or myself would respond. And then we would handle the investigation of origin and cause, and then, work with our law enforcement folks if need be. So that's more of the kind of the time sensitive thing. Whenever those occur, we gotta take care of those right then and there. One of the other aspects of our job is public education. and outreach, things like we're doing now, working with local community groups, talking to civic groups, neighborhood associations, doing education training, disaster preparedness. I'm also I manage our CERT program, the Community Emergency Response Team. So we're working on some new curriculum for that. I also happen to be the liaison for our local Lake Oswego Amateur Radio Emergency Services Group. So they are local volunteers that are licensed ham radio operators, and they're a service organization that in the event of a natural disaster and our emergency communication systems goes down, they actually have resources and equipment where they'll be able to connect us with county and state resources. And also kind of the fun part is being able to go out and do training and education in the schools with the kids. So you can kind of vary, our topics depending on the specific group that we're with. And then that brings me to kind of the last task, right? So if we have three key focus points: investigations, public education, and then also fire inspections. Now, our fire inspections work, we kind of break down into two different segments. The other, as I mentioned, kind of fire investigations being time sensitive. The other time sensitive portion for our fire inspections is new construction. So anytime there's a new building being built, both the fire marshal and I are able to participate in that construction process. We review and approve the plans for fire suppression systems and fire alarm systems. So it could be fire sprinklers, fire alarms, kitchen suppression systems that you would find in a commercial kitchen. And then we also do the new construction inspections as part of the construction process. So one of the other hats that we wear, we're certified fire inspectors, we're certified fire plans examiners, and then to be able to participate in the new construction, we're also certified building plans examiners and certified commercial building inspectors. So we've got kind of those hats that we wear. Like I said, that kind of lets us get out and do the new construction stuff. If we look at the existing buildings, so all of the buildings that are currently built, when the building is built, the building department kind of oversees the construction process. And then once it's done, we look at it as the fire department inherits it. It's our building for the life of the building. And, we're there to help maintain, all of those life safety aspects that were put forth with the construction process. So we also do, as part of our job assignments, our state licensing inspections. So the state, with some occupancies such as daycare facilities or licensed medical care facilities, nursing homes and things, those require state licensing inspections. So rather than the state coming into our jurisdiction and doing the state inspection, we have an agreement with them where they send us the paperwork, and then we actually go out and we complete those inspections because we want to be in the buildings. We want to have those relationships with the building owners, the building operators and engineers, because being familiar with those also allows us to pass information on to our firefighters. So in the event of emergency or other situation, they've got, kind of that firsthand knowledge, and those relationships really matter. So we've got the licensing inspections. I also do all of our school inspections. So try to get into all the schools every year to do the fire and life safety inspections. You work with the school district in, making sure that even with the emergency planning, there's been, I think, some information with regards to, some of the, try to think of the right term here, but lockdown drills and things. A lot of that is governed out of the fire code. So we work very closely with our law enforcement partners in kind of helping to manage how those processes fall into the fire prevention realm and meet all the fire code requirements. Then we get into the other buildings, kind of the large scale, if we think of some of the larger office buildings, we kind of break those down into two parts. The state of Oregon has what they call the fire company inspection program. So we actually train our firefighters to be able to go out and do sort of the basic office type inspections. And then Harriet and I, the fire marshal, we would do sort of the inspection of the larger multi-story buildings, the more complex facilities, anything where there's any type of hazmat, if there's a large public assembly facility. Those are things that the fire marshal and I would do. And then we use the company fire inspection program that our firefighters perform for some of the smaller businesses, whether it's like the accountant's office or dentist office or, dance studio, things of that nature. So our firefighters will go do those. Right now, I know with COVID, it's kind of one of those things, you've kind of heard the list of tasks that we go through. I'm sure that there's probably not very many business owners that are upset that we haven't paid them a visit. Usually it's kind of one of those things when we look at our task lists, it's sort of prioritized based on, the construction portion, those facilities needing, inspections. We have sort of taken a bit of a pause with COVID, with our company inspection program. And we were about ready to kind of start that back up again as the last variant of COVID struck. So we kind of paused again. Just really, we wanted to make sure that we kept not only, the community safe with regards to our firefighters coming into their business, but also to try to minimize the risk for our firefighters so that way we can keep our fire stations adequately staffed and not have any issues or outbreaks. So I'll talk just a little bit about the company inspection program. Essentially what happens, and this is probably where most of the community, most of the businesses will see our presence, is about every quarter or thereabouts, we send a letter out to a group of businesses, just letting them know that in the next several months, they'll probably be getting a visit from our firefighters. They'll be coming out to do the inspection. Then it kind of talks about the inspection process. If they require or need to have a scheduled inspection so that, that way you set a particular date and time, we're more than happy to accommodate you. You just have to let us know. And that's kind of pointed out in the letter. Otherwise, just kind of plan on our folks kind of stopping in. We don't necessarily schedule every inspection because, as you could imagine, the schedule with the firefighters can kind of vary day to day, week to week. And, they could be walking into the business to do the inspection and all of a sudden they get paged to an emergency and may have to leave. So, we always ask for a little bit of flexibility and patience with us on that. If the firefighters do show up to do the inspection and it's not a convenient time, again, if you have a business where you've got one person in the office and they're seeing a patient, all we just ask is say, hey, just let us know if we can come back a little bit later and, and work with us as best you can. And we'll do our best to work with you. Firefighters will, as far as this inspection process goes, they will set up or basically walk the building or the office, the tenant space. They're going to go through looking for, any fire code violations that they may see. Some of the most obvious or the most typical violations that we find are the use of extension cords, particularly the small, we call them zip cords. They're 6-foot cords that have 2 prongs that go into the outlet and then, sort of the multi-plug adapter on the end with the three plugs. Those types of cords actually aren't allowed just because they can be overloaded and they pose a significant fire hazard. So it's use of those cords, daisy chained power strips. So the power strips are fine. You can use power strips as long as those are plugged directly into its own permanently installed outlet, but you can't plug one power strip into another. Exits being blocked. Sometimes you'll see, shipments that show up and usually it happened just that day or that morning and the boxes need to be moved out of the way of the exits. Exit signs that are, if they do have a bulb, they're not illuminated, or fire extinguishers needing to be serviced or inspected. So those are kind of the typical some of the typical violations that the firefighters would see. What they do is they'll kind of go through, they will document any findings that they have. Hopefully our folks are we train them that they should kind of cover what they see and explain it to somebody that's on site, so that way you understand what needs to be done. They'll go over the inspection report with you. They'll finalize the paperwork after updating contact information. Folks will receive an email with the correction notice, and then be given basically a time period. Generally, we want to come back and inspect within 30 days. That doesn't mean that you have 30 days to correct the issues. You actually are supposed to correct the issues immediately, but we just come back probably within 30 days to verify that the issues were taken care of. So if the firefighters come back and they find that the violations still haven't been addressed, they're going to reissue another correction notice, try to work with the with the business owner, try to come up with a solution, and then they'll come back again and do a second reinspection, make sure that everything gets corrected. Now, we understand that there are situations that sometimes arise, particularly with some of the older buildings, where in the case of the need for extension cords, because there's no permanently installed outlets in an area, if you need to have an electrician come in and install another outlet that's closer to a workstation, sometimes those things can take more than 30 days. And it's just a matter of working with us and saying, hey, here's a quote, or here's several quotes. I've got a contractor that I'm scheduling, but they can't be here until such and such a date. And then that's fine. We just push off our reinspection date a little bit further. If the firefighters find that they have to make multiple reinspection attempts and they're not getting or obtaining compliance, they will forward those inspections over to the fire marshal's office, and then the fire marshal or I will get involved, and then we'll kind of come out and pay a visit. And then there's some additional inspection enforcement provisions that we could follow, which would allow us to charge time for our re-inspections, or potentially go down the route of a citation monetary penalty, which usually that's not something that we tend to want to do. We're looking for voluntary compliance, and hopefully through education of explaining why something's not allowed, usually we're able to gain compliance that way. So that's kind of it in a really quick nutshell of kind of the inspection process and some of the things that we see. And I've done an awful lot of talking at this point, so I'm going to kind of open it back up to you guys if you guys have any specific questions for me.
So thank you so much, David, for a guy that's stepping in at a moment's notice. That was incredibly comprehensive. It sounds like you've done this before.
just a time or two. Yeah, just a time.
And so what I've been burning to say is, you mean to tell me that's all you do? I mean,
no, not quite. We also do IT management of some of our electronics, our inspection software. I could go on, but I won't bore anybody with more of the details. But yeah, we've got a pretty full plate here.
That's quite the list. And I understand that, like you said, it being a smaller community, there just isn't the staffing resources to dedicate jobs. Everybody's got to kind of multitask a little bit. Besides that broad range of experience in multitasking, is there anything that separates a community like Lake Oswego from other places in terms of your involvement?
As far as separation, I think that we've got a real, there's some amazing folks here in the community. I've got the great fortune to work, because I do a lot of the CERT training. I've been able to meet and talk with and work with and provide, guidance, tools, and information to some amazing folks in their own neighborhoods that are working on disaster and emergency preparedness. A lot of the neighborhood associations, when I talk with other peers in the fire service about some of the planning that goes on within some of the neighborhoods, they're just amazed. They can't believe what they hear. For instance, after the ice storm last February, so actually it was a year ago today, was the start of the ice storm. And just prior to that, I actually kind of got a group of stakeholders together to work on sort of backup communications plan. I think if folks have seen some of the wildfire incidents that have taken place throughout, not only our region, but mainly down in California, the Camp Fire being one. The communication systems, even here locally during the ice storm, if you had a cell phone that didn't work and you no longer had a landline, or even if you had a landline that didn't work, you may have found yourself without any access to communication to the outside world. So I've been working with a group of folks over the last year to develop a radio communications plan. And the radios actually involve fairly inexpensive, what we call FRS radios, which are family radio service. They're kind of referred to as bubble pack radios, that they don't require a license. They're very easy to use, but we're kind of working on a network of system where every neighborhood kind of gets its own unique radio channel. And that way they'd be able, in the event of a natural disaster, they could kind of communicate with themselves, at least locally. And then through the use of sort of radio relays, be able to jump to a repeater channel with GMRS radios. GMRS radios are General Mobile Radio Service. They do require a license, but you don't have to test for it. It's basically, you pay a fee to the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. And then with a repeater capable radio, I was actually up by Riverdale High School the other day, and I was talking with another gentleman here in Lake Oswego who was down on Boone's Ferry, using basically a small handheld radio. So pretty sophisticated, cool stuff. They're pretty low tech, and you don't have to be a ham radio person to use them. So like I said, I think this, as far as separation in the city, it's the involvement of the people and their dedication, to making the community, improving the livability. So it's been great.
Thank you for saying so. That does sound exciting, and I'm not aware of anything like that in my neighborhood. So how does one become aware of exactly that program you're talking about?
So there's a few different ways, and this might be something we can add to the calendar for a future presentation. If you guys are ever looking for a speaker, I've got kind of a drawer full of topics that we can cover. But right now, the biggest thing is for us, we've got some neighborhoods that have sort of an emergency response team. These are folks that have gone through our community emergency response team program. And they're basically mobilizing through, actually quite a few of the neighborhoods have received neighborhood grants. They've actually purchased some emergency disaster supplies. They have them staged in their neighborhood. The neighborhood association leadership sometimes does not always know who these folks are, and vice versa. So I think, we're trying to find a way that we can kind of build that bridge and the communication between some of those folks that want to do the disaster planning and the neighborhood association leaders. So I would say, if you're interested in learning more about that, start with your neighborhood association leadership and see if they're familiar. And if they're not, then get a hold of me, because I've got a list of folks in quite a few of the neighborhoods, and I can probably get you in contact with somebody.
Fantastic, David. That sounds like a good thing that we should all be aware of in our respective neighborhoods. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up for questions for David. Does anybody have a question? Yes, Anastasia.
Hi, I was curious on how you do recruitment, if you do any, I don't know, like Explorer type programs, or how you reach out to diversity, equity, inclusion type candidates.
So I know that this year they've kind of changed the process a little bit. I don't know, because I'm not involved with the hiring process, at least with our firefighters. We do not have an Explorer or a cadet program like some of the other fire districts or fire departments have. I don't know. It was something that they did years and years ago, but that program had kind of dwindled away. We have actually, over the last few years, it's great that I can say we actually do have 3 female firefighters. So it is kind of great to have them here, and kind of, I know that is for our fire chief now, that's been kind of a big priority for him and for the agency involved. So they are working to improve on that.
Again, thank you, David. Anybody else with a question for David? I know that I've had several business owners come to me. David, you say that it is available to schedule. There is a capacity to schedule the inspections if you have the type of business that requires that. And
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so businesses should receive a letter. We try to mail those out to all the businesses. Of course, our records are only as good as, as the last time we were there. We're generally, or at one point, we're on about an 18-month inspection cycle. So when we started on one end of the city and went to the other, for at least for the company inspection program, is about 18 months. So if a business moves in and it's a new business, or there's a change in tenant space, tenant suite, tenant improvement, we don't always have the most accurate information. So if they get a letter, all they've got to do is just give us a call, say, hey, I'd like to set up a time, so that way I know that I'll be here and I'm not going to have any customers, or I won't have any patients here. Or if I need to do it earlier, that's certainly another option, before your business kind of opens up. I do fire alarm tests as early as 5 a.m. so that way we don't disrupt, the tenants in the building. So it's just a matter of just communicating with us and reaching out.
that is so great to hear. And so I'll say I heard it right from the deputy fire marshal's mouth. When as the chamber gets a business request to that regard, we'll say, all you need to do is talk to them. And
Reach out, communicate.
They'll work with you. Isn't
Yep.
that great how communication works that way?
Yeah.
I know that I've had fantastic response from the Lake Oswego Fire Department. We 3 years ago moved into a new building, and it has a fire suppression system from the 70s. So it's a pressure valve that when it loses pressure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we actually got a call in the middle of the night one night because our fire alarm had gone off. And I was worried that perhaps our building's on fire or perhaps our building's flooded, but the back valve had just simply lost a little bit of compression, so it started leaking out. Fire department was there. Nobody had broken down my door because we have one of these lock boxes. They went to the lock box, they opened the door, they were walking through the building, making certain that everything was fine. So I couldn't have imagined a better outcome as a business owner who had just put all their resources into making that business happen. So I thank you guys very much. And I know when we moved there, we made sure we had that initial contact with everybody. We got a new key, we put it in the lockbox, we made sure all that happened. How many businesses have that fire department lockbox?
A lot. A
Is it
lot.
half of
Yeah.
them?
So for those of you that are not familiar, the fire code allows for us as a fire agency to require lock boxes. We have one specific company that makes a lockbox. So you can't go down to Ace Hardware, you can't go to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy a little combination key box. This is a 1/4 inch thick steel. It is a very, very secure lockbox. Anybody that's willing to break in, they're going to break a window or damage the door before they're able to get into this lockbox. And what it does is the box gets mounted to your building or some location close by, and the fire department carries in our vehicles. We have basically a single master key. We actually have to punch in a 4-digit key code that is specific to each individual in the agency in order to release the key out of the lock, right? So in each fire apparatus, that key is actually kept secure. That key entry pad actually creates an entry, so we know when keys are removed, and then when that key gets put back into its lockbox. So then when firefighters arrive in the middle of the night, and you get the potential of a fire alarm going off, we can go to the key box, we can open the door, we can take out a key or a set of keys, and then we use that so that way we can gain entry and search for the problem. Preferably there is no problem, but at least that way we can start mitigating something. So in your case, Christopher, is probably a dry sprinkler system. So the air compressor, the air pressure released to the point where now water flows into the piping, doesn't leak, it's not spraying anywhere, it just goes into the pipe that is typically in a non-heated or non-conditioned space. So then that way the firefighters can go make sure that there is no water spraying anywhere in your business. If they were to find that, then they're going to start shutting valves off and basically trying to mitigate that. Tarps over, materials in your, furnishings and things, whatever we can do to salvage as best we can and try to prevent or minimize any damages. And then hopefully when we leave, we're going to put the keys back in, lock the cover back up, and away we go. So yeah, it is kind of one of those systems that can prove very valuable to business owners. The biggest thing is a lot of people don't know what it is. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know if it's on their building. It's only generally going to be on buildings that have fire protection systems, either a fire alarm, fire sprinkler system. Those are usually, because those are the things that are going to call us or make us respond in the middle of the night. So, or at times where there may not be a business owner on site, like on a weekend. So, that's definitely something if you're into a new business, if you're a tenant in a large business complex, there's probably a lockbox on the back door by the riser room or the fire alarm control room or an electrical room. And if you're not sure if there's a key in there for your business, just give us a call and we'll come out, we'll open the box, we'll look at the keys, and we can put a new key in there for you. So
that's exactly what happened, David. And like I said, it couldn't have worked better. So big kudos to the Lake Oswego Fire Department. It worked exactly as it should.
Perfect.
I see that we've got Curtis with his hands up. Yes, Curtis.
Hi, David. Thanks for coming. I represent a lot of new businesses and closely held businesses, and I was wondering if you and your team have any resources for them for like employee handbooks on language that we could model for fire safety and try to avoid those things like daisy chaining and using improper electrical cords and things like that.
I don't have a handbook per se, but I do have actually some bulletins that talk about things that you can and can't do. So if you want, maybe what I could do, I could email those to my contacts here, and they can maybe push those out to you guys.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It would definitely be excellent. And I know Liz Hartman will get it taken care of.
Perfect.
She's just amazing that way. All right. Before we segue away from David, any last questions for David? All right. It looks like we're all clear. Again, thank you so much, David. Very much appreciate your time and everything that the Lake Oswego Fire Department does. And again, I'll hold you to it. If we've got a business that needs special timing, we'll tell them to communicate with you.
Yep.
And you're really nice in person. They don't need to be afraid. They can just reach out and call you, right?
No, I mean, that's kind of, everybody kind of thinks fire inspection, right? And it's panic, and, that we are not there to find fault. We are not there to, create problems or issues. I mean, really our biggest focus, and the biggest takeaway is that we want to educate folks so that way they know what's proper. And the key part to remember is that the fire code essentially has become, it's legislation via devastation. There has been a disaster, or there has been some type of incident that resulted in loss of life or major loss of property. And that's why the fire code, it evolves and it changes. And that's why the fire code exists, is to prevent that type of loss. So, like I said, our goal is to work with folks. We want to, keep the community safe. We want to have the businesses, not suffer a loss, because so many businesses, especially now in the last 2 years, if you suffer any type of loss, it's really, really hard, if not nearly impossible, to recover out of. So, that's our goal, is to keep you guys here in town.
And I have felt that I have always had a great time with the fire department and that inspection process. They clearly came across as trying to help. So I can second what you're saying. I guess one final thing, David, that I've got to have you help me lay to rest. So what's the deal between firefighters and policemen? I see now, if you're a 4th generation firefighter, do we have the same thing on the other side?
We do. Yeah. I know quite a few folks that, they're kind of multi-generational on the police, on the law enforcement side. So yeah, I think, for folks, you kind of grow up in it. For me, taking the time away from the fire service and working, private sector was beneficial. But the camaraderie that we see here, it's kind of like, you get folks that are in the military as well. They kind of follow the path of those before them.
a little professional braggadocio.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much, David. We very much appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to finding out more about the local CERT programs as well. So lots of eye-opening stuff today. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm going to drop off now. I've got some contractors waiting for an inspection. So take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Liz, that's your cue. What do you have for us?
That is my